The first time I saw him, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Not just the kind of wrong that makes you uneasy, but the kind that sticks to your skin and follows you home, leaving you looking over your shoulder for the rest of the night. I didn't know it at the time, but that feeling was just the beginning. It wasn't until much later, after everything fell apart, that I realized the truth about the cashier at Harper's General Store. About what he'd done. About who he really was. And by then, it was already too late. There's nothing remarkable about the town of Red Pines. It's the kind of place where the most exciting thing to happen all year is the 4th of July fireworks. One main street, a diner that still uses menus printed in the 80s, and Harper's, a little general store that sells everything from milk to fishing lures. It's where everyone in town goes sooner or later. And it's where he showed up. I first saw him late one Thursday night. I'd stopped by Harper's to grab a few things, chips, beer, the essentials, and the store was quiet, as usual. The bell above the door jingled when I walked in, and there he was, the new cashier. He was tall and wiry, with uneven black hair that hung just above his eyes. His skin was pale, almost sickly, and his eyes, there was something off about them. They were so dark, so still, like the kind of eyes you'd see on a mannequin, not a person. He didn't say anything when I approached the counter. He just stared at me, unblinking, like he was trying to figure me out. "Hey," I said, setting my stuff down. "Hey," he replied. His voice was flat, emotionless, like he was just mimicking what a normal person would say. The transaction was quick, but the whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me. Not just looking, watching. When I walked out of the store, I glanced over my shoulder and saw him still standing there, his eyes following me as I left. At first, I thought maybe I was overreacting. The guy was new in town, probably shy, maybe a little awkward. But the more I thought about it, the less it made sense. There was something about him that stuck with me, like an itch I couldn't scratch. The next morning, I mentioned him to my roommate Ben over coffee. "There's this new cashier at Harper's," I said. "Guy's weird." Didn't say much, but the way he looked at me, it was off. Ben smirked. "Weird like how? Serial killer weird?" "I don't know," I said, shaking my head. "Just unsettling." Ben laughed it off, but I couldn't let it go. Over the next week, I started hearing other people in town talk about him. Jess, a neighbor of ours, swore she saw him outside the store at 2 a.m., standing by the dumpster and mumbling to himself. "Maybe he was on a break," Ben said when I told him. "He wasn't smoking or on the phone," Jess replied. "And it wasn't just mumbling. It was like he was arguing with someone." "Did you see who?" I asked. Jess hesitated, then shook her head. "No one else was there." And then there were the stories from customers. A woman at the diner said she saw him staring at a customer so intently that the guy dropped his bag of chips and left without even paying. A teenager who worked at the store for a summer told me he caught the new cashier in the stockroom once, staring at the wall with this eerie smile on his face, not moving for what felt like forever. It wasn't just gossip anymore. It was a pattern. But it was the old man on the bench outside Harper's who gave me the first real clue. I was walking past one afternoon when he called out to me. "You've seen him, haven't you? The new boy at Harper's." "Yeah," I said. "Why?" The old man leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I've seen him before. Years ago." I frowned. "Maybe you're mistaken. He's new in town." The old man shook his head. "No, no. It was him. Same face, same hair, same eyes. But he hasn't aged a day." I brushed it off at the time. The guy was old, maybe confused. But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. If what the old man said was true, how could that be possible? The next time I went to Harper's, I decided to ask him directly. "Hey, I said as he rang up my stuff. Hey, he replied, not looking up. You've been in Red Pines long? I asked casually. A couple weeks, he said, his voice flat. Cool, I said. Where'd you live before this? There was a pause, a long one. Then he looked up at me, his dark eyes boring into mine. Just needed a fresh start, he said. Something about the way he said it sent a chill down my spine. That night, as I walked past the back of Harper's on my way home, I saw him standing by the dumpster again. But this time, he wasn't alone. By the time the second week rolled around, half the town was talking about the new cashier at Harper's. Everyone had a story about him, how he stared too long, how he never blinked, how he always seemed to be just a little too close without making a sound. But no one seemed to know anything about him. I was determined to find out more. Call it curiosity or just a bad habit of sticking my nose where it didn't belong, but something about the guy felt off. Not just socially awkward or weird, dangerous. One evening, I stopped by Harper's again. It was close to closing time, and the store was quiet. The cashier, his name tag read Liam, though I didn't remember seeing him wear it before, was standing behind the counter, his pale hands resting on the edge of the register. Hey, I said, grabbing a pack of gum and a soda. Hey, he replied, his tone as flat as ever. I paid for my stuff and lingered by the counter. Slow night. He glanced at me, his dark eyes narrowing slightly. Yeah. Does it ever get busy here? Liam tilted his head, like he was considering the question. Sometimes. His answers were short, clipped, like he didn't want to waste words. It made me uneasy, but I pressed on. Where were you before this? I asked casually. You know, before Red Pines. His gaze snapped to mine, sharp and cold. For a second, I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, "Does it matter?" I forced a laugh. No, just curious. Small town, you know. Everyone's curious about the new guy. Liam stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. I moved around a lot, he said finally. Why's that? Needed space. That was the end of our conversation. He turned away, his movements stiff and deliberate, and I took it as my cue to leave. Later that night, I couldn't stop thinking about his answer. Needed space. From what? From who? The stories about him swirled in my mind. The way he stared at people, the way he lingered in odd places at odd times. The way he avoided questions like he was hiding something. I opened my laptop and started digging. First, I searched for Liam Harper, assuming he might have taken the store's name when he started working there, but nothing relevant came up. Then I searched for missing persons, fugitives, and unsolved crimes in nearby towns. It didn't take long before I stumbled onto something that made my stomach twist. An article from 3 months ago, in a city about 50 miles away, reported that a young man had been accused of threatening his family. According to the article, the family had tried to get him committed to a mental hospital, but before the paperwork went through, he'd vanished. The description of the man was vague, late 20s, thin, dark hair, but the details stuck with me. One line in particular sent a chill down my spine. Relatives described him as withdrawn and prone to sudden bursts of anger, often muttering to himself about needing a fresh start. The next morning, I told Ben about what I'd found. You think it's him? He asked, looking skeptical. I don't know, I admitted. But the timing fits. And the way he acts, it just feels off, you know. Ben shrugged. Maybe you're overthinking it. A lot of people move to small towns to get away from stuff. Doesn't mean they're dangerous. Yeah, maybe, I said, but the doubt lingered. That evening, I stopped by Harper's again. The store was busier than usual, and Liam was at the register, ringing up a long line of customers. I watched him as he worked, his movements mechanical, his face blank. He barely looked at the people in front of him, except for the occasional glance that sent a shiver down my spine. When the line thinned out, I walked up to the counter. "Back again?" Liam asked, his voice flat. "Yeah," I said, grabbing a bag of chips. "Busy night, huh?" He didn't answer. As I paid for my chips, a woman walked up behind me. She looked nervous, her eyes darting between me and Liam. "Hey," she said quietly, holding a box of cereal. You work here now?" Liam's jaw tightened, and for the first time, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Anger? Fear? "I do," he said, his tone clipped. The woman hesitated. I didn't think I'd see you again." Liam's hand tightened around the edge of the counter. "I'm not who you think I am." She opened her mouth to say something else, but Liam cut her off. "You need to leave." The woman blinked, startled. "I said leave," Liam repeated, his voice rising slightly. I stepped back, caught off guard by the sudden tension. The woman stared at him for a moment longer before turning and walking out of the store without another word. Liam's hands were shaking as he rang up my chips. When I left the store, the woman was still standing outside. "Hey," I called, jogging over to her. "Do you know him?" She hesitated, glancing back at the store. "I thought I did." "What do you mean?" She shook her head. "It doesn't matter. Just, be careful around him, okay?" "Why?" The woman looked at me, her face pale. "Because the last time I saw him, someone got hurt." I stood there, watching her walk away, her words echoing in my head. And when I looked back at the store, Liam was standing in the window, staring directly at me. After my conversation with the woman outside Harper's, I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. The last time I saw him, someone got hurt. Her words played over and over in my head, gnawing at me. Who had gotten hurt? What had Liam done? I decided I needed answers. The next morning, I drove back to Harper's. I didn't plan on confronting Liam, not yet, but I wanted to see if anyone else in town knew more about him. As I parked outside, I noticed something strange. The store was dark. The lights were off, and the doors were locked. Harper's wasn't supposed to be closed, it hadn't been for years, not even during a blizzard. I stepped out of my car and walked to the front door. A hand-lettered sign was taped to the glass. Closed for inventory. The handwriting was jagged and uneven, like it had been written in a hurry. That's when I saw the old man. He was sitting on the bench outside the store, the same place I'd seen him before. He looked up as I approached, his expression grim. "Where's Liam?" I asked. The old man shook his head. "Don't know. Saw him leave last night after closing, but he wasn't alone." "What do you mean?" The old man hesitated, his eyes darting toward the alley behind the store. "He left with some guy. Didn't look like anyone I know. Big fella, wearing a hoodie." "Did they say anything?" The old man nodded slowly. "Liam didn't. But the other one," he said, "you can't keep running." I felt a chill crawl down my spine. "Do you think Liam's in trouble?" I asked. The old man didn't answer. He just leaned back on the bench, his gaze distant. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was about to happen. I sat in my apartment, scrolling through local news sites, trying to find anything, that might explain Liam's behavior. But there was nothing. At around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jess. "Are you awake? I think someone's outside my house." I immediately called her. "What do you mean, someone's outside?" I asked. "I don't know," she whispered, her voice shaky. "I heard footsteps in the backyard. And I think I saw someone." "Did you call the police?" "I don't want to overreact," she said. Jess, you're not overreacting. Stay on the phone with me. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Jess lived just a few streets over, and I could be there in minutes. When I pulled up outside her house, I saw her peeking out from behind the curtains. She unlocked the door the moment I knocked, letting me inside. I didn't see anything else, she said, wringing her hands. But I swear, someone was out there. Stay here, I told her. I'll check the yard. Jess tried to protest, but I was already heading toward the back door. The yard was dark, the only light coming from a motion sensor on the garage. I scanned the area, my heart pounding. And then I saw it. A single footprint in the mud near the fence. When I went back inside, Jess was holding something in her hand. It was a Polaroid. Where did you find that? I asked. She pointed to the kitchen table. It was sitting there when I came back from the window. I snatched the photo, my stomach twisting. It was a picture of Jess, taken through the living room window. The timestamp on the bottom read just 2 hours ago. You need to call the police, I told her. Jess nodded, her face pale. She reached for her phone, but before she could dial, there was a knock at the front door. We both froze. The knock came again, louder this time. Who is it? Jess called, her voice trembling. No answer. I stepped toward the door, peering through the peephole. Liam was standing on the porch, his face partially hidden by the shadows. Liam? I called. He didn't respond. I opened the door just a crack. What the hell are you doing here? Liam's eyes locked onto mine, his expression cold. She needs to leave, he said, his voice low. What? She's not safe here. Liam, what are you talking about? Before he could answer, the sound of shattering glass erupted from the back of the house. Jess screamed, and I spun around, my heart racing. The kitchen window had been broken, shards of glass scattered across the floor. I grabbed Jess and pulled her toward the front door, but when I turned back, Liam was gone. We ran outside, my eyes darting around for any sign of him, or whoever had broken the window. But the street was empty, eerily silent. The police arrived 20 minutes later. They searched the house and the yard but found nothing, no footprints, no sign of forced entry beyond the broken window. Jess told them about the Polaroid, and I told them about Liam. But they didn't seem convinced. Sounds like a prank, one officer said. Kids messing around. As the cops wrapped up, Jess turned to me. What did Liam mean? She asked. Why did he say I wasn't safe? I didn't have an answer. But as I drove home that night, one thought kept gnawing at me. Liam hadn't been looking at Jess when he said she wasn't safe. He'd been looking at me. I should have trusted my instincts that night. Should have realized what Liam was trying to warn me about. Because 2 hours later, someone knocked on my door. And this time, it wasn't Liam. The knock at my door came just after 3 a.m. It wasn't loud, just 3 soft, deliberate taps, but in the stillness of the night, it might as well have been a gunshot. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. The events at Jess's house were still fresh in my mind, the broken window, the Polaroid, Liam's cryptic warning. Another knock. Who's there? I called, my voice trembling. No answer. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the couch and crept toward the door. My hand shook as I reached for the peephole, pressing my eye to the tiny glass. The hallway outside was empty. I stood there for a long moment, straining to hear anything, footsteps, breathing, the creak of floorboards. But there was nothing. Finally, I unlocked the door and opened it just enough to look out. The hallway was silent, the dim overhead light casting long shadows on the walls. But as I stepped outside, my foot brushed against something on the floor. It was another Polaroid. This one was different. It wasn't a picture of me or Jess. It was a picture of Liam. He was standing in a dark room, his face partially obscured by shadow. But his expression was unmistakable, fear. I slammed the door and locked it, my mind racing. What the hell was going on? If Liam was behind all of this, why would there be a photo of him looking scared? And if he wasn't behind it, who was? I sat on the couch, clutching the bat, staring at the photo. It didn't make sense. The next morning, I drove straight to Harper's. The store was still closed, but I didn't care. I parked out front and walked around to the back, hoping to find some clue about where Liam had gone. The dumpster was overflowing, the alley reeking of rotting garbage. I scanned the area, my eyes landing on a door at the back of the store. It was slightly ajar. I hesitated. Something about the open door felt wrong, like I was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. But my curiosity, or maybe my fear, got the better of me. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The stockroom was cold and dimly lit, with shelves stacked high with cans, boxes, and cleaning supplies. It smelled like damp cardboard and bleach. "Liam?" I called, my voice echoing in the empty space. No response. I walked deeper into the room, my footsteps crunching on the tiled floor. That's when I noticed the small office in the corner. The door was open, a faint glow spilling out from inside. I moved closer, my heart pounding. Inside the office was a small desk, cluttered with papers, receipts, and a cup of pens. But what caught my attention was the corkboard on the wall. It was covered in Polaroids. There were at least a dozen of them, pinned in no particular order. Some were of random places around town, the diner, the park, the bridge at the edge of Red Pines. But most of them were of people. Jess. Ben. The old man on the bench. And me. My chest tightened as I scanned the photos. Each one had a timestamp scribbled on the bottom, but they didn't make sense. One of Jess, taken outside her house, was dated last week. Another, of me sitting in my car, was from 2 months ago. But I didn't even know Liam 2 months ago. The final photo on the board made my blood run cold. It was a picture of me, standing in the stockroom, staring at the corkboard. I stumbled back, my heart racing. The timestamp on the photo was from that very moment. Looking for something? I spun around, the voice startling me. Liam was standing in the doorway, his face blank. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, gesturing to the board. Liam didn't answer. He stepped into the room, his dark eyes scanning the photos. "I didn't want you to find out like this," he said finally. "Find out what?" Liam's gaze met mine, and for the first time, I saw something in his expression, regret. "They're watching us," he said quietly. "Who's watching?" I asked, my voice rising. Liam shook his head. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." Before I could respond, a loud bang echoed through the stockroom. Liam's head snapped toward the sound, his body tensing. "We need to go," he said. "What was that?" I asked, panic creeping into my voice. "They found us," Liam said, grabbing my arm. "Move." He pulled me out of the office and through the stockroom, heading for the back exit. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. When we reached the alley, Liam stopped and turned to me. "If you want to live, you need to trust me," he said. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, another sound stopped me cold. Footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, and getting closer. Liam's grip on my arm tightened. "Don't look back," he said. "Just run." I didn't know who, or what, was behind us. But as we ran into the night, I realized one thing: whatever was chasing us wasn't just after Liam anymore. It was after me, too. We ran for what felt like hours, weaving through back alleys and side streets, Liam pulling me along without explanation. The whole time, I could hear it, the slow, deliberate footsteps echoing somewhere behind us. No matter how far we went, the sound never faded. "Liam, what's going on?" I shouted as we rounded a corner, my lungs burning from the effort. "Who's chasing us?" He didn't answer. He just kept running. Finally, we ducked into an abandoned warehouse near the edge of town. The place was dark and cold, the air thick with the smell of mildew. Liam led me to a corner, crouching behind a stack of rusted machinery. "Keep quiet," he whispered. I tried to catch my breath, my heart pounding like a drum. "You need to tell me what's happening," I hissed. "Now." Liam's face was pale, his dark eyes darting toward the entrance. "They found me," he said quietly. "And now they've found you." "Who?" He hesitated, his hands trembling. "I don't know who they are. I don't know what they want. But they've been following me for years." I shook my head, trying to process his words. "You mean, this isn't just about me? Or Jess?" Liam's gaze locked onto mine. "It was never just about you. They watch everyone. But once they fixate on you," he trailed off, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They don't stop." A loud crash echoed through the warehouse, cutting off any chance of a response. My blood turned to ice as the sound of footsteps grew louder, closer. Liam grabbed my arm again. "Stay behind me," he said. We moved deeper into the warehouse, the shadows swallowing us. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, my grip tightening on the baseball bat I'd brought from my apartment. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, from somewhere in the darkness, a faint click. The flash of a Polaroid camera lit up the room. "Run!" Liam shouted, but my legs wouldn't move. My whole body was frozen, my mind locked on the spot where the flash had come from. Another click. Another flash. This time, it was closer. Liam grabbed me, yanking me backward just as the camera flashed a third time. We stumbled through the maze of machinery, the footsteps resuming their steady rhythm behind us. "Why are they taking pictures?" I whispered, my voice shaking. Liam didn't answer. We reached the far side of the warehouse, where a single door led out to the street. Liam threw it open, shoving me outside before slamming it shut behind us. "Where do we go now?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. He glanced around, his expression grim. "There's nowhere to go. They're everywhere." "That's not an answer," I shouted. Liam sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I tried to stop this," he said. "I thought if I stayed off the grid, if I kept moving, they'd lose interest. But they don't." I took a step closer to him. "What do you mean, stop this? What did you do?" Liam hesitated, his eyes dropping to the ground. "I don't know if it was me. But I think I started it." Before I could press him further, something hit the door behind us with a loud thud. We both jumped, spinning around just as the door creaked open. A single Polaroid fluttered to the ground at our feet. Liam picked it up, his face going pale. He handed it to me without a word. It was a picture of the two of us, standing outside the warehouse. And behind us, in the shadows, was a figure. "We need to split up," Liam said suddenly. "What?" "No." I shot back. "They're focused on me," he said. "If I lead them away, you might have a chance to get out." I shook my head. "That's insane. I'm not leaving you." Liam grabbed my shoulders, his grip tight. "Listen to me. You don't understand what they are. They don't stop. They don't sleep. And if you don't get away now, they'll make you part of it." "Part of what?" I asked, my voice breaking. He didn't answer. Before I could say anything else, Liam turned and ran. "Liam!" I shouted, but he didn't stop. I stood there, frozen in place, as his footsteps faded into the distance. Then, slowly, I turned back toward the warehouse. Another Polaroid lay on the ground. It was a picture of Liam, running into the darkness. I never saw Liam again after that night. The police found no trace of him or any evidence of the events I tried to explain. Harper's General Store reopened a few days later, as if nothing had happened. For a while, I tried to move on. But the Polaroids didn't stop. Every few weeks, I'd find one waiting for me, tucked under my windshield wiper, slipped into my mailbox, or left on my kitchen counter. They were always the same. Pictures of me. And somewhere, in the background, a shadowy figure. The last photo I received was different. It wasn't of me. It was of Liam. And he was smiling.